You have the back and the front complete on the vest. Now it's time to work that armhole shaping and the neckline at the same time. I'm Marley Bird, your by Crafty bestie, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Let's go.
Show me love, show me love. This is all we got. Show me love.
Hello there, my friends, and welcome to the Lorelai Knit Vest. As I mentioned in this video, I will be demonstrating how to do that armhole shaping as well as the front neckline shaping. There is a very cool and easy technique that I do to minimize the amount of finishing we need for the neckline, so I'm excited to show you that. And I'm also excited to help you stay on track with the stitches as they should be on your actual fabric and the decreases that you will be working alongside those bind-offs. Now, this lesson is going to review the front shaping portion, but the homework for this section is the back and the front. My reasoning is if you can do the front shaping, you absolutely can do the back. You'll be able to follow along with the instructions and work the back. It's the front shaping that's a little bit trickier because we do have that front neckline. Now, the advantage of those of you who have the VIP upgrade or the ad-free PDF is that you not only have the complete chart of all of the front and all of the back for each size, but you have the row by row checklist. Now, in my opinion, this is where the row by row checklist really comes in handy because you are going to be doing that shaping on the armhole and the neckline at the same time, and it can get a little tricky. So it makes it easier to know exactly what you should be doing on what row and when. And so hopefully you find those really helpful as well. Because I will be showing you as much demonstration as I can for these instructions, this video might get a little bit long, but I do want to encourage you to watch the whole video completely. As a matter of fact, I always recommend that you watch the whole video first, and then you go back and watch it again, maybe work along with me as you're doing your project. It just helps with understanding at times. Okay, now that we have gone over what we're going to do, I want you to make sure you have that pattern in front of you. If you need the free pattern from marleybird.com, it is available right down there in that link in the description box. If you have the VIP upgrade, your pattern is in the Marley Bird house. And if you purchase the ad-free PDF, your pattern is wherever you downloaded it on your computer or your phone or your tablet. So grab the pattern, your homework, join me back here, and we're going to get started with understanding what it is we will be doing. Okay, friends, let's take a look at the sample here. Now, this is obviously one of the armholes, and we're looking at the front of my garment. Now, remember, I made the 3X size. The first thing I want to point out is as you are doing your armhole shaping, the first row or 2 or 3 or 4, depending on what size you're making, you will be binding off actual stitches. Now, the total number of stitches you bind off is dependent on the size you are making. And the reason larger sizes have more to bind off is because it gives me more of a more flat area down here in the armpit. Okay, so that's why the larger sizes will have more stitches bound off here. It's also a way to rapidly get rid of stitches that we needed for our body, but we don't need as we come up here to the top of our chest. Okay, so we will transition from binding off stitches to then decreasing stitches. I don't know if you can kind of see that nice decrease line right here. Mind you, this has trim already built in. So right here, this decrease line. So I have decreases built in along here, and then I just knit straight up along the neckline. Okay, my decreases, I made sure that I kept them in full fashion shaping. So over here, I want my decreases to lean towards the right. So those were my knit two togethers. And then on the opposite side, over here, I don't have all of this all evened out. Over here, I wanted these decreases right here to lean to the left. So I used an SSK. So I did my decreases and then I come straight up. Now, when we're dealing with the front of the garment, clearly, as we're doing the shaping here, we also begin our shaping here at the neckline. So not only will we be dividing our stitches off here from our column of garter stitch. We'll have 4 of those garter stitches here, and then we're going to pick up stitches behind those 4 and then work up along here. Very similar to how we did the pocket, only this time we're going to pick up stitches here and then carry on along this side. And what that will do, it allows us to have the garter stitch along the V-neck of our vest already worked in, right? So we don't have extra finishing. It's so lovely. When we do this, we then will create shaping along this edge as well. So we do shaping along this edge so that we get the V. This is where it can be the trickiest for people, because as you're doing this, if you forget to do this, it gets completely off track, right? When you're on the back, you don't have to worry about the neckline, right? It's all the way up here. So you just do all of your armhole shaping. You just go straight up to the back of the neckline. That's what your homework is for the back. But when it's on the front, because there's so much going on, we have to be aware of not only our decreases over here, but our decreases over here and our decreases here, okay? I know that that might seem like it's a whole lot of information, but I wanted to give you a broad idea of what it is you are doing as we do this shaping and why I'm really focusing on the front, not necessarily the back. Now, the other thing I want to mention here is that because we're using a colored yarn that's a long color changing yarn, if we are concerned about making sure that the fronts of our vest are as similar as possible, this is where you will definitely want to make sure that you are starting off as close as possible to the same point in the colorway on your ball of yarn. So for example, right here, I tried my very best to make sure that when I was working on, I think it was this side, I can't really remember, I made sure that I was starting roughly at the same point in the color as I was over here. And I got pretty close. Like you can see up here, this purple is a little bit taller, like it's a little bit off, but I got pretty close. It's close enough that unless you're really looking for it, you're not gonna really tell that it's off, right? But let's say that if I had started this purple down here and I kept this one the way it is, it would be different, right? It'd be completely different. So as we separate for the fronts, when we separate for the fronts, that's when we are going to make sure that we are starting our color on both sides at the same point, which is why this pattern required so much yarn. You might be like, I have so much extra yarn. It's because I wanted to make sure you had a ball of yarn that you could, pull some length out of to make sure that you had a starting point that was the same on both sides. All right, don't worry, that yarn's not going to go to waste. We have a lot of patterns that we use this yarn for that you can get for free over at marleybird.com or purchase on my Etsy store, Ravelry store, or Shopify stores. There's a lot of options for you. But I know that there are people who are more concerned about having these colors start at the same point, especially on the fronts. On the back, it really doesn't matter too much, right? And you're not worried about the back because we're not cutting our color. It just keeps going up. But on the fronts, it just tends to be one of those things that you notice more often than not. One other thing I want to go over with you are the charts so that you can quickly see how the charts are so helpful when it comes to not only the shaping, but maintaining that stitch pattern as you are working along. So as we look at this chart, this is exactly what we were looking at when we were looking at the pockets, right? So this is the extra small size, but can you see these are our column of garter stitches? And this column of garter stitch is interrupted with the shaping here, right? But you can quickly see on the chart that it maintains a stockinette selvage stitch out here, and it maintains the garter stitch column as it comes up here, but it just has 2 stitches instead of 4. But it's easy to see as we bind off 4 and we keep that selvage stitch, and then we have to decrease, and then we keep the garter. You can just quickly see how you're able to maintain the pattern. Now, when it comes to this front neckline, it might look a little tricky to start off with because you can't really see here in the video, but there is a purple like zigzag line, and that's to show you that this is the front side and then that's the back side. But where I find it helpful is to be able to see the shaping stitches out here so I can see that I'm maintaining my garter stitch there it meets up with my garter stitch column there, and I'm able to maintain my stockinette windows, right? So if I go to the size that I'm working on, let's see, that's the 2X. Here's the 3X. It's hard to get it on focus. Okay, hopefully you can see this. You can see with this one, my armhole cuts in way more, right? Way more than the extra small, but still it cuts over to where it's the column of garter stitch here, so that I come up and I have the right number of stitches when it comes to my shoulders. And then same thing here, it has a zigzag for the front neckline here. And same thing over here, you can kind of see how everything is able to maintain the stitch pattern. So if you're somebody who needs visuals, this is where it is really handy. I'm gonna pull in the 2X because I wanna mention the 2X size is one of those sizes that had the offset pattern, and all that really meant was it just started off with 6 different stitches here and ended with 6 different stitches here, so that way we still had this column of garter stitch here so we could continue on with the front neckline. We talked about that in the very first video, but I wanted to show you this is where this is why we're doing it. You're going to see that here in this video. Okay. All right, so if you have access to these charts, please go ahead and grab those charts. You can always follow along in the Stitch Fiddle as well. So follow along with the chart in Stitch Fiddle and use their project plotter. I can't think of what it's called, but project tracker. So you can track each row as you go, so you can see exactly where you are. And then of course the row by row checklist is going to be your friend. So if you have access to that, make sure you have that in front of you as well. All right, so we are well into this video and we're gonna get started with our knitting now. So grab your knitting, grab your yarn, and let's jump in with the armhole shaping. This is the homework for the front of my vest. I completed 8 total window patterns. I ended on a wrong side, I'm starting on the right side. For the size 3X, I'm supposed to bind off 4 stitches. So I will be removing my first stitch marker here that was to help me keep my selvage. But I want to point out, in the instructions, it tells you to bind off 4 and then purl 1. And that purl 1 is going to be your selvage stitch. So just so you know, that first stitch, always on the edge here, we want it to be your selvage. So right here, I'm going to go ahead and knit this. And I will remove my marker. And then this is the second stitch, but as I have that first stitch, jump the second, that's the first bind off. So we'll knit one more. That's the third stitch, second bind off, fourth stitch, third bind off. Okay, I'm going to pause here because this is where it can get tricky. Remember when we did the pocket and we did all of the stitches, we had worked all of the stitches, but we had only bound off enough stitches where we had one more to bind off. This is one of those situations. So for this, we have worked 4 stitches, but we've only bound off 3. So the next stitch is actually the next stitch in my pattern. So this should be a purl 1. So I'm going to purl 1 and then have that one jump over. So now I've bound off 4, I've worked 5 stitches, and that purl 1 is actually what is written in the instructions. So when you're looking at the instructions, it says bind off 4 and then purl 1 and then knit to the last stitch and purl 1. That purl 1 is not an additional purl 1. It's that one right there that we just did. Because remember, we had 1 extra loop. We needed it to just jump over whatever our next stitch was. Our next stitch was a purl 1. Okay? So now I'm just going to knit all the way over. I'm going to keep all of my stitch markers in place to separate my stitch pattern. purl my last stitch and turn. Now my next row obviously is a right side row, which we know is just a plain knit row. Now that we completed row 1, the next row we will be binding off again, and just like before, we will work 4 stitches, but we will have only bound off 3 stitches. But because the next row is all knit and the 5th stitch is just a knit, we don't have to stress too much about it, right? We'll just knit that 5th stitch, have the loop on our needle, jump the stitch that we just knit. So we will have our 4th stitch bound off, and we'll just work our knits all the way down the row. Let me show you how to do this. So this time I don't really have to stress too much about what my 5th stitch is because we know it's just a knit. I don't have to do anything special. But on this side, if you are working the size medium or larger, you will be binding off 4, right? So you have these 4 stitches are going to bind off, and then we're going to knit to the end of the row. Because that 5th stitch isn't anything different than a knit, I don't really have to stress too much about it. So I knit my first stitch and the second one. So I've bound off 1, bound off 2, bound off 3, but I've worked 4 stitches. So this would be my 5th stitch, whatever it's supposed to be. And then there's my bind off 4. What do you think about that? Those bind offs are not too difficult, right? All you're going to do is bind off those first 4 on the first row, bind off those first 4 on the second row, and then carry on. So what I want you to do is follow the instructions for the size you are making. You might have to bind off 4 stitches for another 2 rows, for another 4 rows, whatever it is for your size. Get to the part of the instructions where it says split front neck. It's at that point that we will be doing the armhole shaping and the front neckline. So I want to show you how to do that when we get there. So go ahead and complete your instructions up to where it says split front neck, and then I'll meet you there. Hey there, friends. How did it go? By this point, you should have completed all of the instructions up to the split front neck. Now, I'm sure it has gone much better than it has went for me. This is actually the 4th time I've recorded this portion of the video. That's right, I've had to rip out my work 3 other times, put it back on the needles, and this will be the 4th time I've had to re-record this due to audio issues. So let's hope this one is the charm. Having said that, I want to mention that if you want to add a lifeline in your work, this is a very good point to do it. So that way you will know what you can rip back to if you need to, and you just have a safety spot. So if you want to add a lifeline, this is a good spot. Other than that, we are going to move on and work the front left side of your piece. Okay. Now, before we can start working this side of the piece, the first thing I want to mention here is you want to get your second ball of yarn. I have worked these so many times, I had to wind them up on their own because I've had to rip out so many times. But you want to get your second ball of yarn, and you want to try and have your second ball of yarn starting off roughly about the same spot as your first ball of yarn that was attached to here, right? I cut it off because. So you want these two to match up somewhat because you're going to use one ball on the left front and the other ball on the right front. This is why you have the extra yarn in your pattern so that you can have the fronts match up as close as possible. And it's important that you start that right now, like start that, the matching up right now. So you'll continue on this row that you're on with the yarn that's attached. And then as you work the right front, you'll be starting at the same point that you were starting this row with the yarn that was attached. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to do. The next thing we're going to do is we are actually going to do our shaping where we're doing the armhole shaping here. And then we're going to get to the halfway point, which is our garter column in the center of the front. And that's where we're going to separate for the front neck. Okay, so regardless of what size you're making, we're going to bind off 4, work over to the center garter column, and work across all 4 of those stitches. So at this point, If you want to take a look at your work and find your center column so that you know exactly where it is, like for me, it's right here, you can just take a marker and mark that so that you know this is what you're going to be knitting over to. If you've kept your stitch markers in place for the stitch pattern, what you will notice is in the garter column, when you get to this marker, we will actually remove this marker and work the 2 stitches after it. So these 4 stitches of the garter column will end up being the left front neckline. And then what we will do is we will pick up purl bumps right back here, very similar to what we did when we did the pocket. And we'll pick up 4 stitches here and then carry on for this side. And that will be the right side of the front neckline. Okay. So right now we're going to get started to set up our work so that we can work the left front. Okay. Okay. So I have my left front ready to go. And I begin by binding off 4 stitches. And I'm on a right side, so I don't have to worry about what my 5th stitch is, right? Because I know it's going to be a knit. I just have to bind off 4. And this is the same for all sizes, right? Bind off 4. Now I'm going to work in pattern, which is just knitting, over to my garter stitch column. So I want to keep my stitch markers in place because they are very helpful as I work in pattern throughout the front of my piece, because you want to maintain the stitch pattern as not as best you can. You want to maintain it throughout the front of the piece, even as you're doing the shaping. So having those markers in place really help me, especially on the wrong side, when I know that when I am at my marker, I will knit 2 and then I purl 8 and then knit 2 before my next marker. It helps me know where I am in the stitch pattern and maintain my stitch pattern, even as the stitches are kind of altered because of the decreases. Now, obviously, if you have the stitch pattern chart in the ad-free PDF, you can follow along with that with the progress tracker and just keep track of each stitch as you go. That I find incredibly helpful. That's actually what I did on mine, so I highly recommend that. Otherwise, just follow the written instructions. And here we are coming up. This is my middle marker. So I'm going to take that off and then knit the next 2. All right. So those are my 4 garter stitch column stitches. Okay. It's at this point, I'm going to turn my work and only work on this side. So what I have a choice to do here is these stitches here, I can put them on scrap yarn, I can put them on a spare set of needles, or I can carry on this side of my work with my ball of yarn and work both sides at the same time with 2 separate balls of yarn. Okay. What I want to do in the video is I want to just show you how to do the left front as if you're just doing the left front. And then I'll show you how you would pick up stitches behind the garter stitch column and work the right front. I think once I show you both of those, you then can make an educated decision if you want to try and do both fronts at the same time, do each one individually, whatever floats your boat. Okay. So for this video, what I want to do, first things first, behind those 4 garter stitches that we did, or here at the end, I want you to take a marker, take a removable marker, and I want you to put a marker in each of the purl bumps behind those stitches on your needle. What we are doing is we're kind of giving ourselves a little cheat of where we are going to pick up and knit stitches for the right front of our neckline. Just like when we were doing our pocket, when we turned our work just like so and then picked up stitches to work the inside of our pocket, we're going to do that. But this time, these 4 stitches here that we're going to pick up, they're going to be this side of the neckline, and these 4 stitches are this side of the neckline. To give you a better idea, let's look at the sample. You can see here, right here, these 4 stitches are the ones we just did. They're this side of the neckline. These 4 stitches here are what we just marked that we will pick up, and they'll be this side of the neckline. Okay, so it just makes it so it's not as fiddly. We don't have any cast-ons that we have to do, and it's just pretty easy to do. Once I do that, I like to use spare needles instead of scrap yarn, so I have a spare set of needles here. And all I will do is I'm just going to slip each one of these as if to purl onto my spare set of needles. And I'm going to keep my stitch markers in the location that they are, so that way I know exactly what's happening. And then when I go to do my right front armhole and neckline, everything is in the right place. I'll know exactly where I am. I split that yarn. So for me, I like to have them on a spare set of needles. And I get it. You might not have another spare set of needles lying around. I have so many needles, you know, it's my job. So of course I'm going to have a lot of extra needles, but if you don't have needles, just put it on some scrap yarn. So that way, when you're done with the left front, you can go back and work on the right front with those needles, right? You can just keep swapping them out with the scrap yarn and the needles. Just finish one side and then swap them out and use it on the other side. Pretty easy to do. All right, so I'm getting all the way to the end. So my spare needle over here, it's a rather short needle, right? The one over here is real long. So I'm gonna go ahead, I can put some needle stoppers on here if I want to, just so that I don't accidentally grab this needle and start using it. All right, so I just put some needle stoppers on there, and literally I'm just gonna set it and forget it. Anybody else remember that? Set it and forget it. I'm forgetting that. I'm only going to pay attention to my left front. So what I want to do here is, at this point, I'm going to turn my work. So I'm going to turn my work, and I will be continuing on only my left front. See how helpful that was, having that holder there on my needle, so that way I don't accidentally grab it, because you want to keep knitting on the needle that's attached to the one you're working on, right here and here. So I've turned my work. I'm going to completely ignore these markers. Just pretend they're not there. And we're going to work back along this row. Okay, so we're on the wrong side row, and we're going to maintain our pattern. We don't have any shaping. We just maintain our pattern. Well, we know these first 4 stitches are garter stitch, right? Those 4 stitches are now going to be garter stitch throughout. You will have to do decreases where you're decreasing this stitch here to this stitch here, but these are going to be garter stitch throughout. So if you wanted to take a marker so that you know for yourself, hey, I got to keep these 4 stitches out here, I got to keep those garter stitch, you can put that marker there. Just know that you will have to move the marker to work decreases as you go along, but for me, it does help know where I am. All right, speaking of knowing where I am, I'm going to maintain a pattern here, but clearly I'm no longer in pattern where I was before. I don't have all 12 stitches here, but I do know that at this marker, those first 2 stitches before the marker, those are going to be knits. And so by process of elimination, I can count back 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I have 8 purls here. So I'm going to purl 8, knit 2, and then I'm back in my sequence. All right. Yours could be at a different spot because you're at a different stitch pattern than I am, but that's how I use my stitch markers to identify where I am in the pattern. Because this pattern is very easy, it's just knits and purls, and we put those markers in a location where it's very easy. It's 2 knits on either side of it. On the wrong side, you can count back, and like I said, process of elimination, know exactly where you are. So now I've slipped my marker, and I very quickly know exactly where I am in pattern. So I knit 2, I'll purl 8, and then I'll knit 2. I will say, after ripping this out so many times, my yarn is a little bit unspun now. Hopefully it won't be a problem, but it is a little bit different. Gosh, can't even begin to tell you guys how annoying that is to film something and then find out that it's just not good. Hopefully this one ends up being better. Okay, I'm going to get to the end. There's no shaping on this row. We do all the shaping on right side rows, which is very convenient because those right side rows are just knit rows, right? All right, same process of elimination down here. I don't have a marker down here, and past this marker, I don't have a full repeat, right? But I know the first 2 stitches after this marker are knit, and then I have purl 8, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, still within my 8 because it's not beyond 8. So I would purl all of these all the way to the end. And that's how I know I'm staying within pattern if I don't have the chart to help guide me along. Okay? You're at the end of this row. I like to put my yarn there and then turn it again. We're going to turn our work. Oops. Have this right side facing us. Let me get the other end of my needle. And this is going to be our very first row here that we begin with our decreases. Okay, so this very first row for me, I'm going to knit 1, and then I'm going to do a decrease. I'm going to do an SSK, which is a left or a left leaning decrease. And then I'm going to work over to 5 stitches before the end, and I'm going to do a knit 2 together with that first stitch right there of my garter stitch and the last stitch of what I'm going to call like my front. Okay, so this is how you do the shaping when it's at the same time as the front neckline, right? So I will knit 1. That's going to be my selvage stitch. That's my selvage edge. Now I'm going to do a slip, slip, knit. So I go into the first stitch as if to knit and slip it off. Go into the second stitch as if to knit and slip it off. Go into the front leg of both of those stitches and then knit them together. Hopefully you can see there, it looks like that stitch leans to the left. Okay, that's called full fashion shaping. Now I'm going to work in pattern over to the last 5 stitches, which were on the right side, so our pattern is just knit. So I'm going to keep everything going. This is also a great time to double check that while you were on the wrong side, everything is still looking good. You don't have a random purl in the middle of your stockinette, or your garter stitch is not in garter stitch anymore. So you can just kind of peek at your work. By this point, it should look very familiar. So you should be able to quickly recognize if anything is off. But this is just a great opportunity to have sort of the checks and balances. We're going to get down here to the end. One great thing about when you're working the fronts here is because you're working these decreases, the rows go so much faster, right? Because it's fewer stitches. Get some more yarn. When I get to the last 5 stitches, if you remember, I said that if I'm going to mark my front neckline garter stitches, right, that one, I'm going to have to move it. The reason I'm going to have to move it is because I'm going to do a knit 2 together of these 2 stitches. So what I can do is go into this stitch as if to purl and slip it, take the marker off, and then put that stitch back on your left-hand needle. Take your marker, put it on your right-hand needle. Okay? Now you have 5 stitches over here. We're going to knit 2 together. So go into the second stitch first, and then go into the first stitch, just like you're going to knit them, and knit them together. Believe it or not, this leans to the right. Okay, it leans to the right. Can you see that right there? It leans to the right. And then I will knit the last 3, which will keep this in garter. Those are still garter stitches right there on my front neck, and I still have my marker in place identifying those 4 stitches. Okay, does that make sense? Next row is a wrong side row. Again, we won't do any shaping on our wrong side. So when you turn your work, we don't do shaping, but we do want to maintain the pattern. So again, if you don't have the chart, if you're using your markers, you can use them to help you identify where you are. So I will knit the first 4 because I'm keeping those in garter stitch, right? And then here's my marker. I know I don't have 12 stitches here to this marker, right? I know this is like my oddball, but again, I know that before I get to this marker, these first 2 stitches are knits and the rest of these are purls. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's great. It's not more than 8. So I'm going to purl all 7 of these. and then knit 2. Because I just want to remind you, I'm doing the size 3X, so yours might look a little different, but the process of elimination would be the same. Okay, now I'm back in my pattern sequence where my stitch markers actually have 12 stitches between them. So I just maintain my pattern that I've been using all along. All right, so I'm going to do this all the way to the end of this row. No shaping on this row, no shaping. We're going to keep going. And when we get to the next row, we'll be on the right. Oops, I purled that, right? I messed up. That's why I love those markers, because if I mess up, I can quickly be like, oh, that didn't feel right. That didn't look right. All right, so now I have those knits. There we go. Keep going here. 1 and 2, purl 8, 1. Ooh. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, knit 2, slip 1. Again, process of elimination. I know I'm knitting 2, and then I just purl to the end, because if it's less than 8, I know they're all just purls. Right? Okay. Next row, it's a right side row. We're going to do shaping, although this time what you will notice is you're only going to be shaping at the armhole edge. You will not be shaping at the neck edge. Okay, the neck edge shaping is every 4th row, and over here it's every other row as we're doing the shaping here. Okay, and then the neck shaping changes up as we get further up. So like it's every 4th row, and then it'll shift to where it's a little bit further, because we aren't going drastic this way. It'll go this way, and then it kind of curves up and goes up. So you'll notice, just follow along with the pattern, and it keeps it on for you. But I just want to make sure you understand that every 4th row, you will be shaping down here and here. Every other row, you're always shaping right here until the armhole is complete. Okay, so here we go. This one here, I will knit 1, slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, put your left hand needle on the front leg of those 2 stitches and knit them together. And then I'm going to knit all the way to the end this time, not to the last 5 stitches, because I'm not shaping down there. So I'm just knitting, because that's all this side is just knits. All right. If you have a row counter, maybe you've made a row counter, this is a great time to use your row counter on your needles, because you can keep track of whether you've done 1 row, 2 rows, 3 rows, 4 rows. You can kind of keep track of where you are, so you know where you are in your pattern. That's also helpful too if you didn't want to just rely on your stitch markers to know where you are in your stitch pattern as well. There's so many tools out there for you to use to make sure you are staying on track. And don't feel like you can't use them all. You can use all of them. You can use the chart. You can use stitch markers. You can use the row by row checklist. You can use a row counter. You can, anything you want, just use it and take advantage of it, so that way you can get a piece that is perfect. All right, so that's the right side. We decrease at this edge, right? I'm going to turn my work. I'm on the wrong side. Remember what I said? No shaping on the wrong side. So the biggest thing we need to remember on the wrong side is just maintaining our stitch pattern. So again, I'm going to keep my first 4 stitches in garter. So I just knit them. Again, until this is all done, I count back. So I'm going to have those 2 knits, because they're 2 knits before my marker. All of these are purls. And yes, I really do check every single time, because I hate ripping out, ironically. And so I would rather check every single time and use my markers to make sure I'm on track. That's why I always use markers. I don't just say it to say it. Like, I use markers all the time. I need all the tools. All the tools. Let's see here. And I'm to the end. All right, turning my work, I'm to the right side. It's time for me to do the shaping again, not only at the armhole, but at the neckline. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And I want to remind you, we are doing full fashion shaping, which means if you want your stitches to lean this way, you're going to do an SSK. If you want your stitches to lean this way, you're doing a knit two together. That's why at this edge, we're doing knit two togethers, and this edge, we're doing SSKs. All right. When we get to this side, this edge of our neckline will be SSK, and this side will be knit two together. Okay. Just makes your work look that much better. All right, here we are. Knit the first stitch, work my SSK, and then I will knit to the last 5 stitches. And that's for my size. I just want to make sure you guys understand this is the 3X size. That's what I'm working. If your instructions say something slightly different, make sure you're following along with your instructions. The process is going to be the same. It just might mean that you have different stitch counts or different times that you do these stitches. So make sure you are looking at that pattern and following along with the instructions for the size you are making. I know I might sound like a broken record, but you'd be surprised how many times there are people who will get to this point and forget that I'm doing the 3X size. They're just following along with me blindly. And they're like, but wait a minute, now I'm off. It's because they weren't following their own size. All right, so the last 5 stitches. So I'm going to slip this one, move my marker, slip that back, put my marker on my right, work a knit two together. Try not to split my yarn. And knit two together. They look like they lean to the right. And then knit the last 3. I want you to see this. You can see the shaping is starting to happen over here. It's coming in. The shaping here, it's subtle. It's starting to work its way in here. And I'm maintaining my pattern, right? Now let's look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have my 5 garter stitches here, right? Just like down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I did my 4 rows of knits. So I got these 2 garter stitch bands. So I'm at the point in my pattern where I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of my garter stitch here. So my next 4 rows are just going to be knits, right? They're just going to be knits because I want to make sure I'm maintaining that pattern. So I'm pointing that out because you could just get in the sequence of this and then forget you're doing these bands. And then all of a sudden you put your work down. You're like, oh my gosh, the top is completely different than the bottom because you were just maintaining your stitch pattern based on the stitch markers, not really pay attention to the front. So you want to make sure you're still paying attention to those fronts and that you only have those 5 garter band or garter ridges between each of those 2 garter bands. Make sense? Okay. You will continue on working the left front, following the instructions, decreasing at the armhole or decreasing at the neckline when the pattern tells you to, maintaining the stitch pattern, and you do that all the way up to it's time for the shoulders. Then you're going to go back and we're going to do the right front. Now, I want to get you started on the right front so that way you know how to do it. And then we're going to talk about what to do if you wanted to do them both at the same time. Okay? Alrighty. So for this one, I'm going to just put this down here. Let's grab some point protectors here for this one. And just so they don't go anywhere. All right, so I got point protectors there on that one. Coming back, and we're bringing our new yarn, which I know the spot I'm supposed to start at, so because I'm set and I'm ready. Now, when we were on this row, right, when we started this side over here, we were on the right side. That's exactly where we want to begin with this. We want to start on the right side. Let me get these off because I need to use them now. Okay, so you want to start on the right side. But the first thing we want to do, remember what I said? We want to pick up stitches here. So we're going to pick up and knit 4 stitches here and then carry on all the way down this row. So what you can do here is starting over here on this right one, as you're folding this back, I'm going to start over here on this here, that purl bump. I'm going to go into that purl bump, grab your yarn over, and pull up a loop. Okay, go to the next purl bump. It's the one that you have marked here. Go in, make sure you're not using your tail, which is easy to do. Oh gosh, it's all stuck. Yarn over and pull up a loop. Go to the next purl bump, yarn over, pull up a loop, go to the next purl bump, yarn over, oops, let's try that one more time. Next purl bump, yarn over, and oh, and pull up a loop. There we go. So now that those are picked up, I can remove all of these. All right. Those were just there to guide me to know where I wanted to pick up stitches. Okay. Pull those out. And now I will just go ahead and continue on down the row. All right, so using my yarn, I'm on a knit row, so I don't do anything special. I literally am just going to knit on down the row. But before I do that, I do want to grab a marker, because those are my 4 garter stitches, right, at the neckline. So I'm going to put a marker, just like we have over here on the other side. And then I'm just going to knit down. All right, and it's that easy. How cool is that? We don't have to cast on stitches and do any sort of seaming at the neckline. Like, it's all joined together right there. And it's just one of those really cool join as you go techniques, just like the pocket that we are using. And we don't have a whole bunch of finishing to do around the neckline because we're building in that garter stitch around the neckline. And so when we get up to the back of the neck, we'll be able to do a garter stitch bind off and then graft the 4 stitches here and the 4 stitches there. We'll be able to work them together so it will look seamless. It will look really cool. It's just one of those fun things that I love adding into a pretty simple pattern like this, because the stitch pattern's, rather easy, but it's all these little technique design features that are not only fun to look at, but they're fun to do for the knitter. At least that's what I think. Okay, I'm at the end of the row. And I'll turn my work. I will be on a wrong side. We already know that the wrong side, we do not do any shaping. So I don't have to worry about any shaping on the wrong side. I just have to worry about staying in pattern. Same thing over here. You have to go with process of elimination of where you are. So I have my marker. I know those 2 are going to be knits. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I know I'm going to purl all 8 of those. So I'm going to purl to the last 2 stitches. I hope you guys understand what I'm saying with the whole process of elimination thing. I'm thinking that you probably do, since you know the stitch pattern by this point. And I know that by watching a lot of you in the Marley's Minions group, that a lot of you are using the stitch markers just like I intended you to do. Look at that. I start talking and I purled those. Did you guys notice that? So I had to undo them and knit them, slip my marker, knit 2. So I know you're using the stitch markers, so I'm hoping you understand how this works, especially for those of you who are following along with the free pattern, which does not include the chart. For me, the chart was vital. It really helped me see what the stitches were supposed to be as I was working the increases and decreases. And then I have friends who really like the row by row checklist. That was really good for them to understand when they were doing the shaping at the armholes or the neckline. Just gonna get all the way across here. And it's a little tight here to begin with, right? Because we have all these stitches kind of hanging out here on 2 needles. But as you get going, it clears up pretty well. Let's get along. Almost to where my garter stitch is. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. slip my marker for my neckline, and then knit 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. This one will be a little loose, right? Because it's the starting point. It's okay that it's loose. We can tighten that up, and when we weave in the ends, it'll be nice and snug. And then just like before, we turn our work this time, we will be on the right side, and this will be a shaping row. Now, when we were on the right side on the left, right, we started down here at the armhole and then went over to the neckline. On this one, we're at the neckline and we have to go to the armhole. So on this side, we will we'll work these first 3 stitches, and then we're going to do an SSK with these 2. So that marker is going to have to move. And then we'll go down to the last 3 stitches down here, work a knit 2 together, and then knit 1. So let me show you how this works. So I'm going to knit 1, knit 2, knit 3. It's the next 2 stitches that I want to join with an SSK, right? Because I want it to lean to the left. That's why I'm doing the SSK. So I will slip one as if to knit, remove my marker, slip one as if to knit those 2 together through the front leg. I have 4 stitches there, put my marker back on. You see that? Okay, continue on my pattern. And I will work this over to the last 3 stitches. You never put your decrease in the very last stitch. You always put it 1 stitch in from the end, if not more. So this pattern is written in that same manner. We have the decreases worked 1 stitch in from the edge. So you would work over to the last 3 stitches. And because there is no special pattern on this side, we're just knitting, right? Get down there. Trying to knit as quickly as I can so this doesn't take super long, but I think it's important for you all to see this. So I'm keeping it all in the video. Hopefully you guys appreciate that and don't get mad at me for it, thinking that it's just too long of a video, but I know there are people who are who want all of this. All right, so last 3 stitches, because we want this one to lean to the right, we're going to do a knit 2 together. So those 2 stitches there, we're going to do a knit 2 together, and then finish off with our knit 1. Okay, so now we have our right front all started. We have the garter stitch here, and then I keep going. So you can keep going, all right? What do you think? Do you think you're going to work yours up where you work the left front first and then the right front? I guess it would be left front and then right front for me. Or are you going to work both of them at the same time? I will be honest and tell you that I prefer to work them both at the same time, so that way I am sure that I'm on the same row for both of them. So if you're going to do something like that, you want to make sure that you begin reading your chart or reading the instructions, starting on the whatever's facing you, right? So if you are here, it'll be easier to show you like this. If we were starting down here, let's say we're just beginning. We obviously would not start down here, right? Because we work down this row, and instead of putting markers there, we would automatically pick up stitches and work all the way down to this row. Then we would turn our work. So then we would start on the right front, we'd work across to the neckline, and then with this ball of yarn, and then we'd drop those needles in that ball of yarn. With this ball of yarn, we'd work across the neckline all the way over to the armhole. Okay? And then we would turn our work, and then we'd work from the armhole all the way to the neckline, drop our yarn and needles, pick up these yarn and needles, work the neckline, shaping, right, all the way to the armhole. As long as you keep the needles and the yarn separated, right, the needles and the yarn separated, you can do this. You can maintain both of the sides going at the same time. If you've never done anything like a 2 at a time before, and this would be your first time, maybe don't do it this first time. Maybe do it 2 separate pieces this time, so that way you can get the feel of how to do the shaping, and then maybe the next time you get an opportunity to do something 2 at a time, whether it's the front and the back or 2 sleeves or 2 fronts like this, you can jump in with that at that time. But this is one thing you could do. All right, so we've gone over everything for the fronts. right? The armhole shaping, the neck shaping, how often you're going to do them, the right side, the left side. You're working all the way up to where the shoulder shaping starts. That's where this lesson ends. For the back side, follow the instructions. They're very, very similar. You will have bind off rows, and then when it's time to do decreases, you'll have a decrease at this armhole, right? Your first decrease on this armhole will be an SSK. You'll work all the way across to the next armhole, where it'd be 3 stitches before the end, and you'll do the knit 2 together and knit 1. Okay, so you just work back and forth until you get to the top, like the back of the neck, and that's where you will end for the lesson on this. I know it seems like a lot of knitting, but it will go by really quickly because you're decreasing stitches the whole way. Whether you're on the front and you're decreasing at the armhole edge and the neck edge, or you're on the back and you're decreasing at the armhole edge, it goes really, really quick. So hang in there, be patient with yourself, use those lifelines if you need to. Just remember, I had to rip mine out 3 times, and hopefully once I go to edit this, everything is good and I can hit publish on this. Gosh, if it's not, I'm just going to be so upset. But here we go. Go ahead, finish your homework, and I'll see you in the next lesson where we will work on the shoulders, and then we will finish everything up by seaming it together and doing all of the final finishing bits, which is not that much. So you're so close to done on this vest. So hang in there, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys. It recorded, you guys. It recorded. I hope you enjoyed the video. Oh, yes, I'm so happy.